What's going on, ladies, gents, and kids of all ages? It is Eric coming back at you once again from the Nerd Cave, and today we have another very exciting deck tech video coming at you. I'm super excited about this one. This is one that I did not originate, but I have tweaked a little bit from the original list. If you check out any other content creators, you may have seen Spessy did a video on the finals match of the Content Creator Set Championship that they do in Europe. It's generally one of the first set championships to happen, one of the first large profile set championships to happen, and one of our first glimpses at what deck lists may look like for the championship. One of the things I thought was super interesting is the deck list that did end up winning was a Sapphire Steel deck, something that people haven't really been playing in the current meta because our old view of Sapphire Steel just really made it look like it wasn't better than Sapphire Ruby. It was just like a worse version. However, this Sapphire Steel list is quite spicy, and it steers into some things I've been doing with some other off-color deck lists that I think really made me interested in this deck, made me want to check this deck out. Like I mentioned, I made a couple tweaks to it. We'll talk about that as we go. Before we jump into the deck breakdown, as always, a big shout out to the Patreon for making giveaways on the channel possible. If you guys want to check out the Patreon, some of the free stuff that you get for joining it, including downloadable files of some pretty cool content. We'll have more of that coming very soon. We'll be getting more on the ball with Patreon in the upcoming months, so if you're not in there already, it's a great opportunity to support a small channel and support us creating more content for you guys going forward in the future. But without any further ado, let's go ahead and get into our breakdown of our slightly tweaked version of the Harlan Sweetes Sapphire Steel tournament winning list. So the first card in the 1-drop slot is going to be for Robin Hood Beloved Outlaw, 1 cost, inkable, 2/2, questing for 1, not doing anything else. As you guys I'm sure already know, he is just a shift target for our big Robins. Our other potential turn 1, and this is going to be really good into those steel matchups. This is something I like to think I helped popularize with my featuring it inside of my pirate deck list. I just think it's that good. Even when it's a character type that doesn't fit a character type based deck, it's still worth playing, and that is Mickey Mouse Food Fight Defender, a 1 cost, inkable, 1/2 stat line, questing for 1 with resist 1, so it's almost like a 1/3, but in a way it's kind of better. If you have a traditional 1/3 and that 1/3 takes 1 damage from something like Tinkerbell and then takes 2 damage, it is going to be banished, whereas with Mickey Mouse, if it takes 1 damage, that is going to be resisted, and then the 2 damage is going to be resisted down to 1, so he would still be on the board in that situation. Last up in the 1 cost slot, and this is the one card that totally differs from the original deck list. I have some count changes, and we'll mention those also as we go, but that is going to be Fire the Cannons. He was playing 2 Baboom in his list at 2 cost, inkable, does the same thing, deals 2 damage, but it can also deal that damage to locations. Fire the Cannons is a 1 cost, uninkable, deal 2 damage to chosen characters, so it's not going to be able to do it to locations. However, it only costs 1. It did bump the uninkable count for the deck list up from 14 to 16, but I think that's still a super manageable amount of uninkables, especially as low as the overall curve of this deck is. I think there's a lot of instances where you would rather have a Fire the Cannons than have a Baboom. Like we saw him ink Babooms in a lot of instances. He never really used the Baboom to deal damage to a location. So those are the two main things that are going to make it quote unquote better than Fire the Cannons, is that it's inkable and it can deal damage to locations. A lot of times he was inking it. However, if you're going into that turn 4 and you want to be able to establish something like Alice, that you can get Alice down on turn 4 and still have that 1 ink to play Fire the Cannons, whereas if you're looking at something like Baboom, you almost have to think about committing a turn to it or playing a 2-drop character and your Baboom on turn 4, which just isn't as exciting as playing a Fire the Cannons with an Alice. Next up in the 2 cost slot, and I think this is a fantastic choice. This card is so good, and that is going to be Calhoun Marine Sergeant, a 2 cost, uninkable, 3/2 stat line, questing for 1, resist 1, so it's going to be able to survive out in a lot of instances when it's taking damage. Let the Storm Rage on isn't going to deal with it right out of the gate, and during your turn, whenever this character banishes another character in a challenge, you're going to be able to go ahead and gain 2 lore, which is fantastic. Same ability as Robin Hood. Next up in the 2 cost slot, a card I've been hot on since it came out is Mr. Smee Bumbling Mate, a 2 cost, inkable, 3/3 stat line, questing for 2, and at the end of your turn, if you don't have a captain in play, he's going to take 1 damage. However, you can almost take advantage of him taking damage with some of the shenanigans we're doing with this deck in the later game. We'll talk about that more when we get to it. Next up, and this was one of our count changes, we are on 4 Doc Bold Knight, a 2 cost, uninkable, 1/3 stat line, questing for 1. He was only playing 3 in the original list. I think you really need the card draw. I think 4 docs is where you want to be, and when you play this character, you may discard your hand to draw 2 cards. Next up in the 3 cost slot, we are on those Alices that I mentioned, 4 Alice Savvy Sailor, a 3-cost uninkable 1/4 stat line questing for 2 with Ward, which means it's pretty much always going to come into play and be able to quest unless you play it in front of something like a Be Prepared. But why would you do that? Sisu would also deal with it, but hopefully you're tempoing it out before Sisu is a problem. And whenever this character quests, another chosen character of yours gets +1 lore and Ward until the start of your next turn, so it is a great way to keep another character alive. It is also fantastic to note that you can do this on when you're questing with her, you can use her ability on a character that you just played to keep them being able to be removed with direct damage before they're able to quest in. So if you have something that quests for 2 or more and you'd rather just keep that safe until the following turn as opposed to getting the 1 lore on another character, Alice is a great way to do that. Next up, we are on 3 John Silver Ship's Cook, a 3-cost inkable 3/3 stat line questing for 1. When you play this character, chosen character can't challenge during their next turn. You may have seen me feature this card in our Emerald Steel Pirates deck list. I think this card is really super good. Being able to prevent a character from challenging can be hugely disruptive to your opponent. There are many instances, and you may notice it after playing a card like this, that your opponent has one main character that's challenging, or maybe a couple main characters that are challenging, and their other characters are questing. So being able to shut down one of those challenge sources while you're still questing in their face can really flip the game in your favor. Next up, we are on another slight tweak, which is 3 Pete Games Referee instead of 4. He is a 3-cost inkable 3/3 stat line questing for 1, and when you play this character, opponents can't play actions until the start of your next turn. I think this card is fantastic. I just personally, in my experience, don't want to see that many Petes coming through. I think Pete is a great card on turn 5 or turn 7 or into the Steel Song match. Maybe multiple Petes turn over turn is good, but that's really the only matchup where I think you want to be playing that many Petes, so I did cut from 4 to 3. Another 3 of in the deck list is going to be Strength of a Raging Fire, a 3-cost inkable action song. Deal damage to chosen character equal to the number of characters you have in play. So if you're able to stay pretty aggressive on the board, this can be fantastic. As long as it's dealing at least 3 damage, it's very good. If it's dealing more than that, it's just absolutely crazy. Jumping over to the 4-cost slot, we are on 4 Pluto Guard Dog, a 4-cost inkable 1/5 stat line questing for 1. He has Bodyguard though, so he's going to be able to protect your field, and while this character has no damage, he gets +4 strength, which is absolutely crazy. So not only is he going to be able to block for you, but he's going to be able to block with 5 strength and only cost you 4 to get on the board. Next up in the 4-cost slot, another great value proposition is Scrooge McDuck, Aficionado of Antiques, another card you may have seen me talk about in my Amber Sapphire list. In fact, there's several cards in this deck that cross over with my Amber Sapphire list, and that's what made me so attracted to it. Cards you don't see people play every day, like Scrooge McDuck, a 4-cost uninkable 5/5 stat line. Fantastic stat line for a 4-cost, and he's questing for 2, which just seems kind of nutty. I'm glad he's getting more popular because I picked up foils of those cheap like a while ago. Then we are on 3 McDuck Manor, a 4-cost inkable location, 1 to move in, which you will never be doing because there's no benefit to do so. 9 Willpower, which is absolutely crazy, stays out of the range of a lot of things, particularly a lot of things that may be on the board on turn 4 or even on turn 5, and it is going to be netting you 2 passive lore at the beginning of each of your turns, which is a great way to potentially close out games or just really keep the lore pressure on your opponent. Next up, jumping over to the 5-cost slot and another count tweak, we are on 3 Cogsworth Grandfather Clock. He was on 4 of these in the original list. Personally, I think the deck is a little too heavy aggro to bother being on 4 Cogsworth, so I did reduce it to 3. He has a 5-cost inkable 2/5 stat line, questing for 2, shifting for 3. Wards, he's not going to be able to be targeted with any damage or removal when he's first hitting the board, so it's a great way to get that sneaky quest in for 2. And your other characters are going to get resist +1, which is part of why I reduced the count of him, because mainly you want him for the resist +1, which is fantastic, but it puts you in a position where you're not always questing with him. And I think in some instances with this deck, it's better to just continue to be aggressive. Speaking of staying aggressive, we are on 4 Gantu Captain Crankyhead, a 5-cost inkable 4/3 stat line, questing for 4. You heard me right, questing for 4, which is absolutely crazy. I didn't think this card was that good into a pretty predominantly steel meta, being that it is a 4/3 and it can be removed by a lot of that steel removal. However, in this deck, you are playing 4 Alices, so that's where I talked about playing Alice on turn 4, having a 1-drop to play alongside her. Your main and best 1-drops to play us alongside Alice on turn 4 are either that Mickey Mouse, which could still be relevant on turn 4, more so than a Robin Hood probably is going to be for you, although Robin Hood is a playable option as well. Or, even better yet, to continue to keep the board in your favor, you have those Fire the Cannons. You can go turn 4 Alice, turn 4 Fire the Cannons, jump over to your turn 5, play Gantu, who quests for 4, quest in with Alice, give Gantu the ward, and then they're not going to be able to remove him until your following turn. Steel's really not going to be able to do anything about him, so he is going to sit there and he is going to quest for 4. Next up, also in the 5-cost slot, we are on 2 Beast Tragic Hero, a 5-cost inkable 3/5 stat line, questing for 2, shifting for 3, a card that has fallen slightly out of favor in the current meta because of things like Madame Medusa just being able to remove it at wholesale, and things like Ice Block being able to reduce its strength, so it even would be able to be banished by a brawl. Being able to quest for 2 and having the ability at the start of your turn, if this character has no damage, draw a card, is fantastic. A lot of times they are going to put damage on him, but otherwise, if he does have that damage on him, he's getting +4, so he's going to be able to challenge for 7 at that point, which still can be good. Like I mentioned, the big issue with not playing more beasts is not related to him not being good when he has damage on him, it's related to him being able to be outright removed before he gains you any value. But in some situations, beast is going to be a great card to have. Another good but semi-situational card to have is going to be for Robin Hood, Champion of Sherwood. He is best when he is going to be able to be shifted, so if you're not being able to take advantage of that shift line with him, perhaps you want to just go ahead and ink those big Robin Hoods. But if you're going into those later turns of the game, he's not a bad top deck. He is a 5-cost inkable 3/6 stat line, which makes him difficult to remove right away. Madame Medusa deals with him, but the 6 makes him difficult for Steel to deal with. He is questing for 2, shifting for 3. Like I mentioned, that shift is where you want to be with him, and during your turn when this character banishes another character in a challenge, you're going to gain 2 lore, just like Calhoun, so he is like the OG Calhoun. Fantastic ability. And when this character is banished in a challenge, you're going to draw a card, so that's going to be one of your few card draw mechanics in the deck, which is a big reason you want to be able to get the Robin Hoods out. But if you can't, sometimes you have to alter your playline. And the last card in the deck, and another count tweak, we are on 3 Baymax Armored Companion, a 5-cost inkable 2/6 stat line. He was playing 2 of these in the original deck list. We are playing 3 because I think there's some decent steel cards that are probably going to take damage onto them, like Pluto, Smee, Beast, that you're going to be able to take advantage of that Baymax with, because he is not only questing for 2, but when you play this character and whenever he quests, you remove up to 2 damage from another chosen character of yours, gain 1 lore for each damage removed this way. It can be a great way to close out games, and like I mentioned, you have a lot of steel characters that your opponents are very likely to put damage on that Baymax is going to give you the opportunity to take advantage of. So I think he's great as a 3-of. I played a Amethyst Steel deck list with 3 Bell with a similar strategy. I was running even more targets for that though, because I had like the Plutos, I had the Smees, I had Lawrence, I was playing a couple Razuls. So there's a lot of things my opponent was incentivized to put damage on, and then being able to take advantage of that with the Bell was great. Being able to take advantage of that with Baymax is going to be a similar strategy. But that is the deck list. That is my adaptation of Harlan Sweetes Sapphire Steel list. What do you think? Do you think I made the right changes? Do you think you should just stay on Boom and 14 uninkables because it's potentially better than 16 uninkables, or do you think 16 uninkables is a safe place to be? Always love to hear you guys' thoughts in the comments below. If you feel so inclined, remember to like and subscribe if you have the time, if you haven't done so already. About half of our viewer base is not subscribed to the channel, and that is what's going to get you the opportunity to win in those giveaways, so make sure you are doing that if you haven't already. But thank you so much for sticking around to the end. And when you see those toys, video games, or Baymax off in the distance, remember, it is not a mirage. You guys have a great day.